Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 114 of Waking Up to Narcissism. I am your host, Tony Overbay. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm excited about today's topic. It's so funny to say excited about it because we're going to talk about emotional neglect and emotional immaturity and some good old narcissistic traits and tendencies. But I guess what I'm excited about is there's often thoughts, or I call them these squishy ideas that are kicking around in the back of my head. And then the more people you meet with, the more you're getting to test certain theories or see things play out in therapy, the more you start to put these pieces together. And so today I want to try to put together some pieces of a puzzle. And before we get to that, though, I do want to read. I have fallen behind on sharing some of the poems, some of the stories that people send me. And there was one that I received in the last week or two that doesn't necessarily fit right on topic today, but I just thought it was very powerful. And I get a lot of good feedback from the poems that you send in and the examples in the story. So please continue to send those in, even if it's just to be something, a therapeutic exercise for yourself. But this one, the person gave me full permission to use it, and it's called A Day After You. She said, I wake up early to begin the day. I begin the day with a smile. Nobody around to scream, to start fights because they didn't get enough sleep, or make pointed comments because they just aren't a morning person. I feed and I dress the kids, greeting them each with a hug and a smile as they one by one start their days as well. They smile because nobody is there to cause the air to be sucked from the room. Nobody is there to cause the tension while waiting to see what the fight will be about this morning. What promise was broken? What lie was told? What did I do wrong to cause the slight? Dinner was put in the fridge because I did it myself, and the doors are locked because I did not rely on someone else to lock them. The trash is taken out, my heart is full, and my mind is finally free. My children play and learn with happiness instead of anxiety as they wait for the next fight to start. They come to me with pride at each accomplishment. I clean, I cook, I interact. I speak to my kids calmly because nobody is around to cause the air to explode. I rely on nobody but myself, and in doing so, I give myself the much needed breath of air of knowing that it will always get done. I do not have to question what the truth is and what isn't. I do not have to prepare for a battle if another broken promise comes up because there are no broken promises. I am my own person, and when I see a need, I fill it. When a job needs done, I do it. If groceries need to be bought, I buy them. I do not have to wonder what lies and excuses there will be today. I do not have to be blamed for all the terrible decisions of someone else. I do not have to be attacked and goaded into a fight for asking someone if they could take the trash out or fix the toilet. I am allowed to feel. I am allowed to feel pain, happiness, sadness, tiredness. I'm allowed to express my emotions without being told that I am wrong, crazy, or a bitch for feeling them. I cook dinner with my kids, helping, and I wonder how I got here. How am I okay after it all? I wonder how I let myself be caused so much pain. And as we prepare for bed, I look at the day and realize that not once was I attacked, not once was I spoken down to or abused. I was happy. I was able to get things done and be a real being and have real emotions. Not once today did I have someone call me names to hide their own shortcomings. Not once did I have somebody accuse me of something outrageous that I've never done to hide that they themselves had done that very thing the day before. Today, I lived my life without pain. I lived my life without being told that everyone in my life hates me for the way that I responded to the abuse, told that everybody can see how crazy I am. Today, I was okay. And tomorrow, I will be too. And my children are okay. I can see the healthy emotions bursting out of them. I can see them living without questions of fighting, without fear, and I can give them that life. I can teach them to grow and learn from emotion instead of hiding it and being forced to think that it is wrong to feel. I can show them that hard work pays off. I can show them that it's okay to have a bad day. You don't have to bring others down with you. Today, I live my life without being attacked, and I can see that it's the start of an entirely new life, one filled with hope and love and laughter instead of pain, questions, and fear. Instead of regret, each night my heart will be full, knowing that I made the right decision, that I walked away, and I'm okay with that I will come out of this on top, and our lives will all be better for it. I do not need him. I do not need to be manipulated. I will thrive without, and I will finally live in peace. I will thrive without him, and I will finally live in peace. She said, feel free to share. I needed to type this out. Since you started me on this journey of healing with your podcast, it seemed fitting that this was the place I did it. You've given me a place of hope, a place of knowing that what I'm seeing and feeling is real. I started at episode 1, currently on episode 85 of Waking Up to Narcissism, and can't thank you enough for the information. You've given me a place to start. For that, I'm very thankful. Thank you. So I want to thank that listener. And if she's on episode 85, she'll hear this maybe in a few months. But I hope that when you do hear this, that you're even in a better place emotionally. And feel free to write and let me know. Check in. So let's get to today's episode. So full disclosure, it sounds so dramatic, especially not for what's coming next. I am not a huge puzzler. Yes, I puzzle, but nothing too intricate. Maybe it's my ADHD, or maybe it is my ADHD, but trying to find where random puzzle pieces go is one of the only things that, honest to goodness, causes me a fair amount of anxiety. That and the Waldo, that piece of work, I swear, once back in my 20s, and I don't remember where I was, but there was a Where's Waldo book, and it was sitting out on a coffee table. And I would have sworn it was a joke version, because Waldo was apparently nowhere to be found, like on any of the pages. I looked for him. I certainly did. Anyway, back to puzzles. So I would tell you that I like doing puzzles, but honestly, I like the people who do puzzles around me, namely my daughters, my wife, I've got a niece, Reagan. So I enjoy puzzling with them. Well, there's been a puzzle that I've been trying to slowly piece together over the past few weeks in my head. And I think it's been a similar thing where it's been almost frustrating trying to put certain pieces together. But I think that some of the pieces are really starting to fall in place. It's been a sort of a foggy concept, but it has been slowly but surely picking up steam until over the past couple of weeks. I think at the very least, I have some pieces that I'm going to try and put together. So I'm pretty sure that today's episode, this is why I was alluding earlier that I was excited about it, will be probably unlike any that I've done, and that I'm going to share a lot of information. And I honestly don't know exactly where we'll end. But I think that if I put this out in the world of narcissism and emotional immaturity, then maybe some of the people who are listening to today's episodes will probably write in with their own examples or their own questions or their own experiences. And then we'll further the dialogue around a couple of key concepts that I don't think are often put together. And that is, so stay with me here. Maybe get ready for my own 4 pillars here, assuming good intentions, that I'm not, I come in peace. And if your immediate thought is, that's ridiculous, you're breaking my pillar 2, can't tell me you disagree or that you think I'm crazy, even if you disagree or if you think I'm crazy. And then pillar 3, questions before comments. I will tell you more, and then we'll stay present. And I'm open to seeing that by the end of this, and I told myself I'm committed to putting this out there, even if by the end of it I say, yeah, actually, no, I take that all back. But it's the similarities in the childhoods of the narcissist or the emotionally immature person and the pathologically kind. I feel that they almost have more in common than we often think. That both we'll just say again, for the sake of emotional calories and effort and words and editing, I will use the word narcissist from this point forward. But for anyone who is new, it is the narcissist or the person on that spectrum of narcissistic personality disorder, all the way over to just a little bit of emotional immaturity and all that makes up that in between. I think that there's some similarities that are really interesting with the pathologically kind and or the empath or the highly sensitive person and the narcissist in their how they grew up. And so I'm so fascinated to know where that fork in the road lies. And we talked about narcissistic family systems and things like that. And I've got some thoughts about that maybe we'll cover in a future episode. Even things like, I think I've mentioned that I often find that the scapegoat in the narcissistic family system, as frustrating as that can be, that is a person that, as I work with the person that has clearly identified as a scapegoat, I almost feel like that is the person that has the best chance to break out of the narcissistic family system, maybe become this transformational figure. But we'll talk about that on a different episode. The narcissist and we'll just say the pathologically kind, and that can also fit in with the highly sensitive person, the empath, those things as well. But they both often experience a significant amount of childhood neglect. And my reason for trying to piece this together is at least twofold, maybe threefold, but we'll see. But the first is just being from a place of awareness, because I think knowing is often the first step on a path that eventually leads to healing. And if one never knows or can never put words or concepts to the feelings that they grew up expressing or repressing, then they can never truly begin to accept and grow from their experiences. And instead, they may continually be in a state of anxiety or a state of immaturity or insecurity. And I think that you'll start to see, and if you're watching the video, I think I'm going to continually put up my 2 hands, because on the one hand, if we've got the pathologically kind, that maybe they still, though, that people pleasing or the thing that keeps them in this constant state of anxiety, we'll look at a little bit of the concept of being differentiated. And what do they do with that discomfort? Or what do they do with that anxiety? The way that they relieve it is to caretake or be willing to then take the anger, the immaturity, the frustration from the narcissist, and then they will do something about it, which just feeds that narcissistic pattern of behavior, because then the narcissist gets to alleviate their discomfort by getting angry or controlling, and then they feel good. And then that pathologically kind person takes in that anger, that frustration, and then they internalize it. And then they feel like, okay, this is a me issue. I have to take care of this. So I think today we'll talk a lot about the impact of childhood neglect and abandonment on our emotional development and how it can shape us into who we can become as adults. Now, over 2 years and probably 100 plus episodes ago, yeah, I started waking up to narcissism with this idea from many years of seeing couples in my practice that we throw around this word narcissism a lot, but only a small percentage of the population actually fits the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. But when you start to identify what qualifies as emotional immaturity, I think it's safe to say then that we can all find areas in our lives where we most likely show up emotionally immature, and typically followed by a yeah, but. So, for example, I can definitely show up emotionally immature in my reactions to certain people and certain things that are said. But, okay, so technically there's not a yeah in front of that, but I don't like when people try and tell me how I feel. So if I'm truly trying to do my own mental health work, then that would be something that I can work on for me, because I am me. So I have the best chance of changing myself to become the best version of me. So why do I get so reactive when people tell me what I'm thinking or how I'm feeling? Well, it's because I would like to have a voice, please. And even with a little curiosity, that would be nice. So why don't I just say that? Yeah, right. Because if I do that, then A, the person I am asking will most likely reject me. And there's that anticipatory rejection, good old ADHD. Two, they could actually now want nothing to do with me, because that sounds pretty clingy if I'm being wanty and needy. C, I'm also saying, hey, here's some buttons that you can press the next time that you're angry with me. Oh, do you want to be heard now? Yeah, I hear you. I hear you saying that you're an emotional crybaby. So forget that. I will just let people continue to tell me how I feel, and I will shut down, or I'll say that I agree. I'll play small, even though I don't. But my point being, it sure does seem like a lot of people who find themselves wanting desperately to be heard seem to be in relationships with people who don't want to hear them. Or possibly worse yet, people who will hear them, but then they'll tell them that they're wrong, and they'll proceed to tell them how they think that you're feeling. I think that it's safe to say that we can all identify areas in our lives where we show up a little bit immature, whether it's in our emotional reactions. I think that's a huge one, or playing small so that other people won't feel less than around us. I think that happens so often with the pathologically kind. I don't want that person to think that, or I don't want that person to feel like. And then if you're going on the train to narcissism, then you can also think that you are completely right about everything and just think that you are so evolved. And so this leads to the question that has been on my mind for quite a while now. And I also maintain that I am not sure if any of our own parents, bless most all of their hearts, had any idea what providing a secure attachment to their kids really meant. I really don't think so, because we're barely figuring that out now. So if we're all pretty emotionally immature, then I think our immature reactions and desires for control and the push and pull and the back and forth, the games that we play, are the familiar. It's what we saw playing out in our homes. So today we'll explore the theories behind how, when you really dig into it, what turns someone into the pathologically kind, while someone else from the same family system or even from similar backgrounds seems to then have an extra helping of narcissistic traits and tendencies. They seem to be sometimes similar childhood experiences that can lead to drastically different outcomes in adulthood. So to start, let me just lay out a bit of foundational work. I'll go to the work of Eleanor Greenberg, a clinical psychologist who I've referred to from time to time on this podcast and on my virtual couch podcast. She's an expert in the field. She suggests that can be seen as a series of coping strategies. And these strategies begin as an adaptation to a childhood environment where the person experiences unstable self-esteem, a dependence on external validation, and lower empathy. In essence, narcissism then can develop from the need to survive and navigate a family dynamic that is marked by neglect. So now neglect can sound like a very intense, dramatic, and triggering word, but at its simplest definition, it means to fail to care for properly. Now, there's a therapist named Darlene Lancer, and she said this in her article, Attachment Woes Between Anxious and Avoidant Partners, that is in Psychology Today. And I did an episode on that on the virtual couch a couple of years ago, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But she talks about attachment theory, and she said that attachment theory is determined that the pursuer, so you're looking at a pursuer and a withdrawer in relationships, the push and pull in a relationship, but she said the pursuer has an anxious attachment style, and that the emotionally unavailable partner has an avoidant style. And research suggests that these styles and these intimacy problems originate in the relationship between the mother and an infant, because babies and toddlers are dependent on their mother's empathy and regard for their needs and emotions in order to sense their selves, to know who they are, to feel whole. So, to an infant or a toddler, physical or emotional abandonment, whether through neglect or illness or divorce or death, threatens its existence because of its dependency on the mother for validation, for development, for wholeness. Then later, as an adult, being separated in intimate relationships, then is experienced as this painful reminder of that earlier loss when your caregiver was unavailable. So here's where I have to say that no mother is capable of perfection. That's silly to even expect that. So the very system in which we grow up is one set for challenges and set to create these abandonment, these attachment wounds, this neglect in a sense. Because as Darlene Lancer goes on to say, if the mother is ill or depressed or lacks wholeness and self-esteem, then there are no boundaries between her and her child. So rather than responding to her child, she projects and she sees her child only as an extension of herself or as an object to meet her own needs and feelings. So she can't value her child as a separate self. So the child's boundaries are sometimes violated, or its autonomy or its feelings or thoughts are disrespected. And I appreciate her words. And I want you to know, for a very long time, I didn't want to share them, although the concept for some can be liberating. And that even when doing one's best, this is the point I think is really important to let sink in. Even when doing one's best, because we don't know what we don't know, we're doing what we're doing because that's what we do. There are still so many variables at play. I want to make a point that what she's not addressing is the role of the father. As a father and a hopefully recovering emotionally immature partner, I think it's pretty safe to say that the husband in that situation does impact the relationship. They do play a role. I think in most relationships, they are one of the key variables that are providing. I'm so trying to say this not in the right way, but I think this is why it's hard to talk about this, because I'm not trying to say the cliched, it takes two to tango. Hey, you both need to own your parts 50-50, because I don't think that putting a percentage on that is very helpful either. But when we both are operating from a place of we don't know what we don't know, then there are going to be challenges or situations in the relationship that will lead others to react a certain way. Now, down the road, we have to understand the concepts of differentiation. And yes, that is a me thing, the way that I interacted. But if I didn't know how to operate from a strong sense of self or be confident in who I am, then I am going to be reactive, and I am going to feel hurt if the person that I care about is showing up emotionally inconsistent. And so I think this is one of the key points of this concept. Look at all the variables that go into how our parents showed up, which then modeled or taught us a way to show up in a relationship with us both not knowing what we don't know. And I'm not trying to say that that excuses certain behavior, but from the therapist lens, I'm just operating from a place of, so this is where we're at. And it does help to understand the concepts around what got us to this situation, what got me to the situation I'm in, whether it's the way that I show up emotionally immature or inconsistent or reacting instead of a grounded response. And yes, it's easy to say, well, if my partner would have shown up a different way, then I would have been able to do something different. Sure, if we want to say that, but the reality is this is how they showed up and this was my reaction. And now all I can do is really look at what my role in that is and then take responsibility and ownership for change. So then that can clearly lead to some of the mother in the situations possibly feeling unseen, unheard, which can lead to some of those feelings of anxiety and depression. And then those concepts can then play out in how she shows up to her kids. And if the husband is feeling like, or the same thing, reverse those roles, because the wife can absolutely be the more emotionally immature, absolutely. And the guy can be the pathologically kind person who's trying to manage her emotions, so he's not showing up his best for the kids. So back to there are just so many variables that I think then lead to that feeling of what we're talking about today, this emotional neglect or abandonment, and then how that impacts the kids. And then what do they do with that? Now, before I get canceled from the male population, remember, I come in peace, because we too don't know what we don't know. And we most likely weren't given the best of examples either. So at the core of emotional immaturity might be a fear of doing anything wrong, or else this person that I truly do think I care about as best as I can will leave me. So that's what leads to the concepts of things like gaslighting. I didn't do it, or I may have done it, but it's only because you did something to provoke me, but now I'm sorry and I feel better. So we're good, right? And a topic for another day, but one that I have been tackling more and more over on the Virtual Couch podcast is that it's what we do when we finally come to some of these realizations that that is the most important thing moving forward. Acceptance that I didn't know what I didn't know. And here I am. And now it's time for me to do my work. Back to today's episode. So Darlene finishes up her point by saying that because of the mother's lack of wholeness or her depression or anxiety or even illness or other situations that are can be beyond her control, that consequently the child does not develop a healthy sense of self. So instead, the child discovers that love and approval come with meeting the mother's needs. And so they tune into the mother's responses and expectations. Now, this also can lead to some shame or some codependency because the child learns to please or perform or rebel, but in any case, gradually starts to tune out its own thoughts and its needs and its feelings. So now, if you're thinking, though, that you didn't have that kind of childhood at all, that it was idyllic, and I'm not trying to say it wasn't, now we have Dr. Janice Webb shedding light on the concept of emotional neglect. So she explains that emotional neglect occurs when parents fail to meet their child's emotional needs adequately. This type of neglect often goes unnoticed by outsiders because the child might appear to live a pretty comfortable or normal life. Beneath the surface, there's an emotional void that affects every interaction and experience with their parents. Because children that are deprived of emotional connection learn to disregard their feelings. And that can lead to a profound sense of self abandonment. And when you're a kid and you really do think that the world revolves around you and you don't have a true concept of what's going on with others, then it's really easy to internalize that I must be doing something wrong or bad if my parents aren't meeting my every need. So, as we continue in this episode, we'll take a look at how some of the similar experiences of childhood neglect and abandonment can result, though, in just vastly different adult behaviors. So, while one person might develop more narcissistic traits as a defense mechanism, another might become overly accommodating and lose touch with their own needs and emotions. So, both people are operating from a false self. So, let's stay with Dr. Webb and we'll go over her article, Why Emotional Neglect Can Feel Like Abandonment. Janice's goal has been to build awareness of the long lasting, often, and I appreciate this concept, invisible effects of childhood emotional neglect on people's adult lives. And this is where I want to throw my 2 cents in about acceptance and commitment therapy, that if it starts to feel heavy, that it just is. And it's okay because we didn't know what we didn't know. And here we are. You are an amazing combination of your nature and nurture and birth order and DNA and abandonment and rejection and hopes and fears and interactions and relationships. This is where we're at. This is how I feel. And I'm starting to learn this. And if I start to feel bad about it, it's okay. I want to encourage us sitting with those emotions, letting us feel those emotions, breathe into them. What are the stories that they're trying to tell us? Thank our body for emoting because maybe we've suppressed those emotions for so long. But now we have an opportunity for growth, some good version of self-confrontation. And Dr. Webb talks in her article, she says a rundown building, an old car on the side of the road, or a father who hasn't seen his kid in years. These are things that typically come to mind when we think of the word abandonment. But emotional abandonment is different because it's not noticeable like a rundown building. So to understand what emotional abandonment feels like, we have to first talk about the inner workings of emotional neglect. So she says that childhood emotional neglect is far more common than you might think. And this is why I lay the groundwork of saying that as we didn't know what we didn't know, and people are dealing with their own issues as an adult and their relationship issues. And now we know as adults ourselves, we're probably dealing with insecurities, whether it's in the workplace or let's say that we're in a church community or family and we are feeling like we're not meeting up to the cultural demands that are expected on us, or there's the familial demands. Maybe we don't have a good relationship with adult children or our parents. Think about all of those things that are going on. It's interesting because I have a lot of clients that are in professions like doctors and attorneys, and I've worked with a politician or two. And it is fascinating because when you're younger, you just think that the doctor that you go to has life figured out. And then when you get to sit with the doctor, they're struggling with their family system. They may not be in a healthy relationship with their spouse. They may have invested so much time in their career and wanted to just people please and give their spouse everything that they've ever wanted to so that they will like them. But now that inability to maybe say no or to have more mature conversations has put them in a spot where they feel like, okay, now I'm stuck but I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know how to communicate through it. And then meanwhile, that's the person that you're going into saying, hey, I got a little scratchy throat. And if they're having quite a day, that can factor into what they bring into the workplace. if I go back to the what, okay, and where did I jump off the path? Childhood emotional neglect. So far more common than you might think. There's so many variables, and so that it happens when parents fail to respond enough to their child's emotional needs. And who knows what enough is, and who knows what those childhood emotional needs are, because the child doesn't actually know what they are themselves. So it is playing this game of the child emotes and they want somebody to make them feel better. That's that need for external validation. Makes sense because they're a kid. And then the parent might be going through their own stuff and not quite sure how to show up themselves and not know how to validate their kid. So even though it happens in a simple way, it's not so simple to see. Dr. Jana says childhood emotional neglect easily goes undetected. And so an outsider might see a child living in a nice home, attending a nice school, showing up at church. What they don't see, though, is an emotional void that's creeping through almost every encounter and experience that a child has with their parents. So even though your emotions may be invisible, they are no less important than your basic needs for food and shelter. And she says that, in fact, emotional connection is a basic human need. Everybody requires this to thrive in the world. We've got enough studies on attachment. And that's even where, if you look at the immature version of attachment, and I often say that when somebody says, well, why do they just interact with me the way that they do? But it's that sometimes a narcissist just needs to interact with another human to know that they exist. That is going all the way back to a child exiting the birth canal, which I was about to say I got to watch. I didn't, but I have a brand new grandson for the first time. So exciting. But it does cause you to just think, wow, this kid is so dependent on everything for everybody to meet all of their needs. And they're adorable. He is amazing. So you want to meet those needs. And so no wonder we're setting the stage for, hey kid, if you emote, you got half a dozen people jumping at your whim. But then the more advanced, the more evolved, the more grown up they get, then all of a sudden they're emoting and we're saying, hey, you're good. You got it. But so children need enough response, emotional response, validation, and emotional education to grow into fulfilled adults. But I'll continue to go back to this concept today is that, but sometimes we're having a hard time figuring our own self out. Your emotions send you important messages about what to do and when to do it and why. They engage you, they motivate you, they connect you, and they guide you to live your life aligned with who you are and what you value. So when you experience emotional neglect as a kid, you're kept in the dark from this rich and engaging emotional world. You incorrectly learn that your feelings maybe aren't that important. Ultimately, though, childhood emotional neglect teaches you not only then to abandon your emotions, but also to abandon yourself. And so she talks about 3 emotional needs of every child and adult. 1, an emotional response, being seen. So she gives good examples of, I noticed you got quiet. Are you sad? Or I see you're disappointed. Or I understand you're angry right now. And it's crucial, she says, that parents notice what their child is feeling and communicate it to them, because this then teaches the child that their emotions are important and that other people can notice them. And then responding to a child's emotions sends the message that their feelings are real and they deserve attention. And this sets a precedent for how your child responds to their own feelings in the future. And I think what is so interesting about this is, so now look at what happens if our child emotes and then that makes me uncomfortable. So then I want to get rid of my discomfort by telling them to not worry about it, or it's not a big deal, or, well, what did you do in that situation? Or, well, that's really not the right way to think about something. And I think we do that so often, even when parents are coming from a good place where they want to help their child get through something and not feel the pain. And that is a me issue, that I don't like the way I feel and I want to be a good dad. So I want validation almost from my kid. So I'm going to show up in a way that tells them how they need to handle this, because that makes me feel like I'm doing a good job. And then they will adore me and validate me. And then hopefully they will feel better. And then everybody wins. But in reality, I alleviated my discomfort and I taught them that their feelings aren't really very valid. And so then what do they do to get rid of their own discomfort with their feelings? Then they ignore them, they neglect them, they suppress them, they hand them over to somebody else to take care of. The second emotional need of every child and adult is emotional validation. Just being able to say things like, man, that makes sense. I can understand why you're sad, or I'm here for you while you're feeling this, or of course you're feeling disappointed. It is such a bummer when things don't work out the way we want them to, or I can understand why you're angry and that isn't fair, what happened to you. And if we go back to the concept of, if I'm unwilling to say those things, is it because I wasn't modeled those things? Is it because it is uncomfortable for me and I just want to get rid of the discomfort right now and let them know to not worry about it? As if then the kid or any of us, if we're told, hey, don't worry about it, and we just go, I had not thought of that. I will no longer worry about it. Thank you. That is amazing advice. But kids need to know that their feelings also make sense and that they're valid, because they are valid to the kid, and the kid is trying to make sense of it. So when you affirm a child's emotional experience, now you're letting them know that what they're experiencing is understandable and it's relatable to others. One of the things I love about being a therapist is normalizing things. When somebody will say, "You probably never heard this," or "Have you ever heard that before? Is that normal?" And I can express very clearly and confidently that, "Oh, that's a normal reaction. It is the reaction you're having. Yes, I have heard that before." Since emotions then are this deepest, most personal expression of who a kid is, Dr. Joyce says that validating their emotions confirms that the emotions are there to guide them, and so that they should be listened to. Then the third emotional need is emotional education. She gave some examples of saying, "Okay, so you look sad, and I can tell that by the look on your face. Let's talk so I can better understand what's going on." So again, it's not saying that I know how you feel, because we don't feel heard or seen. But if it's that, let's talk so I can better understand what's going on. Tell me more. What's that like? And because people often feel better after just talking things out, when they can just express something with somebody that isn't trying to tell them how to fix it, or that, well, don't think that way. And then you have this chance to then validate that those are very real emotions. Those are real feelings. I know you had your hopes up. It can feel disappointing when things don't work out the way that we want them to. It's okay to feel this way right now. And that's where, when somebody feels heard, then you can start to get to that point of acknowledging that I do see you. And I'm so grateful that you shared that. And my experience is that these things they will pass, but I hear you. And how can I show up for you? We just need to give it time. I know you're angry. I'd be angry too if that happened to me. And anger often gives us energy to take action when something isn't right. So let's talk about what you want to do about this. And we just have to remember, children are not born understanding emotions and how they work, and I don't know about you, but as adults, we sure have a rough time with them as well. And so it's just like going to school and learning about anatomy and history and math. Then we also need to teach more about emotions. I know in the world of emotionally focused therapy, EFT, in the book Hold Me Tight, or I think it's Sue Johnson's next book, Love Sense, she talks about that we should be teaching emotional resilience, emotional intelligence in school. And Dr. Jana says that while the school system can be a great way to increase a child's emotional knowledge, the best place for learning, though, is in their own home, from the people they interact with every day, from the best models and teachers that have the most interaction with them, which is their parents. So then if the parents don't have their own emotional game together, then you can see where it is going to be a confusing world for the young child. And we're back to this place of where it can lead to people pleasing. It can lead to withdrawal. It can lead to avoidant behavior. It can lead to, I have to just be the most awesome person in the world to get my parent to finally acknowledge me. But most of the time, it does not involve being seen or heard as a kid. And so then the kid learns that I am not worthy of being seen or heard, but that is still this desperate human need that we have, is to be seen, to be known, to be part of a group, a tribe, in a relationship. And I love that Dr. Jennifer Finlayson Fife says this so often, that we think we want intimacy and relationships, but typically what we're asking for is just validation. And it takes so much courage to put yourself out there, to be known. And it takes a great deal of courage to then be able to sit with the discomfort of truly knowing somebody and not making it about me. Like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're saying that. Do you know how that makes me feel?" Or, "Oh, okay, I didn't know that's actually where you wanted to live. And so I guess I'm not helping you achieve your dreams, and I'm a big piece of garbage." I mean, we get so reactive that it makes having these true, intimate conversations difficult. And I think we can start to see now that has been this programming from the factory. And it goes back, we could say, generations, as people have not been aware of how to communicate their emotions effectively, which is why I really still think that we are just starting to get to the beginning of this, we'll call it an emotionally enlightened period. And oftentimes when we start to get this new tool, we're going to maybe go overboard with it. We might even weaponize it. But at some point, we'll settle in with what that really looks like in a healthy way. So how exactly does childhood emotional neglect feel like abandonment? A lot of people who are experiencing childhood emotional neglect say, "But I had everything as a kid." And they describe having things like a home, plenty of food, a desk, school supplies, latest toys, maybe even a bike, eventually a car. So those are physical needs. And so a lot of times our physical needs were met, and maybe they were even met well. And what I think is so interesting is I know that one. I think I'm a good dad if I'm providing the necessities of life, but it's because I don't think that we were modeled or taught that the emotional part is also a necessity. So then did your parent meet your emotional needs? Did they teach you how to identify and name and respond to and validate and express your emotions? And I'm still going to go with the bless their heart. They didn't know what they didn't know. Were emotions talked about? A lot of times the emotionally neglected people that describe their physical needs as being well met have trouble, though, remembering really deep and meaningful memories from their childhood. And they'll often describe feeling more alone or feeling different from others. And then that carries forward into their adulthood, where they often feel unseen and alone, even if they feel that they had positive childhood experiences. We had a lot of cool vacations. I always had clothes. I mean, I'm not saying this was my experience, but that's where people often will say it. So they think, okay, so this still must be a me problem. Something must be wrong with me because I have a hard time tapping into my emotions, or I don't like to sit with discomfort. So parents may be fine at fulfilling the physical needs of their kids, but I often think that it is absolutely without knowing that we are not showing up as consistent as we can to fulfill those emotional needs necessary for life. So why emotional neglect can feel like abandonment. And number one, that lack of response. Kids are going to just express themselves in these raw, unfiltered ways, and it can be overwhelming and it will make us uncomfortable. And what do we want to do to get rid of that discomfort? But this is because they are new to feelings and emotions, and they are kids and they're trying to develop their relationship. They're testing out boundaries with their feelings. They don't even understand that their feelings are there to tell them what they want or what they need, or that they're an essential tool for life. And so when your parents don't respond to your emotions in a healthy way or enough, or that lack of response can start to feel like, okay, I must not matter. That is abandonment. And you're left feeling like you don't matter, like you are not of worth, or you are not worthy of this person taking the time to really get to know you. And so that will cause somebody to feel alone, confused, without a chance to develop a healthy relationship with their own emotions, which is why we're designed to deal with emotion in concert with another human, or relationships become these people growing machines. And we are going to interact with somebody else, and emotions are going to come up, and we have to learn to sit with them. We have to learn to be okay with them and invite them in and feel them. And they will cause us to feel a lot of things, but that will start to be more of our guide. There's also that concept of lack of validation, and kids really need their experience normalized. When a kid gets bigger, then they receive more confirmation from other people around them. Your Dr. Jana says things like, the examples, you're getting so big, pretty soon you'll be a big girl in middle school. The child then understands, so apparently it's okay to grow. That part is to be expected. But then I would add, though, but then if all of a sudden, hey, calm down. Okay, not okay to emote, okay to grow. Or, hey, clean your plate. Okay to eat, but not okay to have feelings or emotions. So if parents don't communicate to their kids that their feelings are normal and okay, then kids might assume that my feelings just obviously don't make sense. I must not make sense. Something must be wrong with me. Holding that belief then that your feelings are bad, or that you're bad for having the feelings. And that starts to set you up for a lot of feeling less than, inferior to others. And then she also ends this talking about this lack of emotional education, that the fact that kids aren't born with emotional knowledge. They need help understanding where the feelings come from, what they mean, how to identify them in their bodies. I love that exercise of where I just sat up straight now. Where do you feel it? Do you feel it in your chest? Some people feel the flesh in their cheeks. Some people feel like they can't breathe. I know when I let my big feelings in, a lot of times they are gripping that chest big time. And then what does that teach me? Without education and guidance from their parents, they aren't equipped with emotional intelligence. And then emotional intelligence is something that can help you build healthy relationships first with yourself. That's ideal. And then you can show up better in your relationships in adulthood. And the world of emotions to the person who is emotionally neglected then absolutely feels foreign. It feels unsafe. It feels like I'm going to do it wrong, even though I'm just trying to do it. I'm just trying to show up as myself. And I appreciate some of the tips and tools that Dr. Jonas talks about is what to do from here. If you're identifying with childhood emotional neglect and recognize that feeling of emotional abandonment, know it's normal. Here, let me do this for you right now. It's okay. And you're not alone, and you can get through this, but it is going to absolutely be leaning into the, I don't know what I don't know. So learning how to start paying attention to your feelings. When you start to listen, you'll start to know that they are sending me messages. And I have noticed a lot lately that when clients are starting to realize that they are okay and that it's okay to have the feelings and emotions they have, it's almost like the feelings and emotions say, are you sure you're okay with this? Because I don't know what this is going to look like. And so then they go big. The feelings can become big and overwhelming. And I think that even makes the person feel like, okay, these will probably never end. What if I am continually doing this for the rest of my life? And that's that fear, that uncertainty, because the reality is that I promise that isn't going to be the case. When you start to feel your emotions, let them in and really acknowledge them, they just want to know that they're okay to come out and be seen. And then eventually you'll start to notice them and you know that this is there, it's there to guide me. It's there to help me understand when something's not safe or when something feels good or when maybe I need to look at something a little bit of a different way and I don't have to get rid of those emotions. I don't have to apologize for the emotions. And just understanding that those messages, they will tell you things. They will inform you about your likes and your dislikes and your strengths and your weaknesses and your ability to be able to do the things that really matter to you, find a strong sense of purpose. And those are the things that lead to confidence, that lead to a strong sense of self and what will help you feel more connected in life. And when you feel good about yourself, now it is so much easier to stay grounded when you are interacting with others who may not know you and they may be trying to tell you, this is what you're doing, this is how you feel, this is what you said. I had an experience very recently where I had someone that was feeling very frustrated and they were telling me a lot of things that they think that I was doing. And it was really fascinating to be able to stay grounded because I feel confident in myself and the things that we were talking about. So then I was able to stay emotionally consistent and hold that almost that container of safety for them and say, man, I hear that you sound frustrated and that does look hard. And even at that point, they were saying, see, you don't even mean that, or I hate when people say it that way, or because I think that they're patronizing me. I know that I'm not. So then I was able to say, I can understand that. I am not, I care. I want to hear you. I can see that you're frustrated. So knowing yourself really helps with that grounded response. And it will be scary when you start to turn your focus inward and start to take a look at your emotional world. Your feelings of abandonment, though, will start to over time diminish because you'll no longer need to ignore how you're feeling or go to that default of something must be wrong with me. And Dr. Jonas says, when you choose your feelings, you are choosing yourself and you won't regret it, which then I will absolutely agree with. And I think that that is such an important thing. So now let's jump from that article over back into some Eleanor Greenberg territory where she's talking again about narcissistic personality disorder. So let's go back to this definition where she talks about, and I'm going to now say, I'm going to take ownership of this, or emotional immaturity. I'm going to take liberty of that for the population for who I'm talking to right now. So we go back to the definition, a name of a series of coping strategies that began as an adaptation to a childhood family situation that left the person with unstable self-esteem and the inability to regulate their self-esteem without external validation. And I think right there, we can start to see that is probably a common trait or a common way that the pathologically kind and the emotionally immature grew up. And then she adds then another characteristic of lower empathy. And I think that's maybe where there's some further research to then see that what was that modeled? How was that modeled from the parent to have that lower empathy? Is that a nature thing? Is it more of a nurture thing? But I think those parts about having unstable self-esteem and the inability to regulate their self-esteem without external validation are where we can start to see that when we look at we're all emotionally immature until we learn to self-validate and we learn to really get to know ourselves. That's where I think the healing can really come, whether you are the pathologically kind and learning that it is okay for me to feel and think the way I do. And if you're the emotionally immature, I need to stop trying to just alleviate my discomfort and be able to sit with those emotions and self-confront. And it is going to be scary. And I always appreciate that Eleanor Greenberg's the one that really brought a lot of awareness to me personally around the concept of whole object relations. People with a narcissistic personality disorder also lack whole object relations and object constancy. So let's stay in the vein of just the emotionally immature in all of us. Whole object relations, that's the capacity to see oneself and others in a stable and integrated way. Now, one's self in a stable and integrated way that acknowledges both the person's good and bad qualities. I would even say challenging qualities if you're looking at yourself, or qualities that you would like to work on. And then object constancy is the ability to maintain a positive emotional connection to someone that you like while you're angry, hurt, frustrated, or disappointed by his or her behavior. So when you take that inward, then as well, is that I can maintain a positive emotional connection even to myself when I have emotions or feelings that are uncomfortable. When I do get angry or hurt or frustrated or disappointed by my own behavior, that I can still maintain this positive emotional connection with myself. And she says, without whole object relations, without object constancy, then people, I'll then add, that are emotionally immature can only see themselves and other people in one of two ways. Either they're special, unique, omnipotent, perfect, and entitled, this concept of high status, or they're defective, worthless, garbage, low status. So that means the person struggling with emotional immaturity can't hold on to his or her own good opinion and feelings about somebody, even myself, once they notice that the other person or themselves has a flaw. Now, all of a sudden, the other person, or I will say ourselves, go from being special and put on a pedestal to being devalued as nothing special. So the emotionally immature often seesaw back and forth between those two when they're feeling good about you, or more accurately, you make them feel good about themselves. And if you're playing the game with me here, or if I am viewing myself as when I feel good about myself, or others around me are making me feel good about myself, then I feel special, or you see the other person as special. Then you do something that the other person doesn't like, such as say no to one of their requests, and suddenly you are now all bad or worthless. Later, you might do something that makes them feel good again, and you are back to being special. And so I think that when you look at that internally, that there's maybe this a little bit more of a genesis or an origin story of why it can feel like the person coming to me saying, I don't know, I think I'm the narcissist. And they're not. They're more of the pathologically kind, but they are trying to get validation from this person that is also unaware or needs that external validation. The pathologically kind is trying to alleviate that discomfort in their partner or in themselves by then, I will take over and I will take your discomfort. I will take your anger. I will take your anxiety. I will take that from the kids. And it is my job to now diffuse it within the family system, even at my own detriment. And so to the narcissist, it's okay, I don't know how to feel my feelings. So then I'm going to alleviate my discomfort by getting angry or trying to find that one-up position so that I can feel better about myself. So kind of wrap that up here today. I would love your feedback on today's episode. And I think I succeeded in the point of not really knowing if I succeeded or not. But I just want to put that out there, that if we really look at that concepts around childhood abandonment and neglect from a place of that, there are so many variables that go into that. And if we frame that in the, I don't know what I don't know, and now I need to go on this journey, this hero's journey for myself to discover who I am, now it will require me to interact with other human beings, but then from a place where I'm allowed to feel my emotions, I'm allowed to acknowledge them and sit with them. I don't have to play small. And then I can start to then learn how to be more grounded in my responses because I am learning more about who I am. And part of that is that when I am interacting with other people, and if they are trying to tell me who they think I am, I will always start with that is adorable, because I'm going to start from a place of I am trying to figure out who I am, and I'm open to, the floor is open to questions, but I don't even have to respond if I just don't really think that that's the case. I can ask some questions maybe, but this is a me thing in a good way, because this is now my opportunity for growth, my opportunity to start letting my emotions and feelings in. And I may not be in a position right now where I can show those to you, because that is me still handing over some brand new buttons that I've found. And that might be a good thing to work with a therapist, or if you're working with a coach or someone like that, to start to really explore yourself so you can show up better in relationships, because you are starting to learn who you really are. I could go on and on, but I am so grateful to be able to put out content around this. I love your feedback. I would like to think that I'm becoming more and more differentiated every day. So I welcome the feedback. I welcome the examples, the questions, and then we'll integrate those and try to see if we can keep this conversation train going down the road. But thanks for showing up. I see you. I see the work that you're doing. I know there are so many people that are on this path. I get the emails. I see the numbers of downloads and the comments, and it blows me away. But I know that people that are already through a difficult relationship, or they've grown in that relationship. And then I know that there are people that are just saying, like the person that I read the letter at the beginning today, that they're just now starting down this journey and they're just trying to figure all these things out as quickly as they can. And that can feel overwhelming, and go back to this place. If we're not good with those emotions, that can be a challenge. Don't forget to write. And I will see you next time on Waking Up to Narcissism. Have an amazing week.